Women in India have been fighting for their rights for a very long time now. And many women's issues come to the forefront through the hard efforts of women's groups who have fought various battles and even won. But does anyone ever stop and think about the rights of men? Do men find themselves at the receiving end? If they do, how do they cope? Are there any organizations that stand for men's rights? These are some of the questions that we are going to try and find answers to today when we ask whether we need men's liberation movement. Welcome to Gender Discourse. I'm Lottie Alaric. To carry this discussion forward, I have in the studio Mr. Sandeep Bhartiya, who's the president of Gender Human Rights Society. And sitting to my left is Mr. Vivek Agarwal, who's an advocate and who also fights for the rights of men. So I take this opportunity of welcoming both of you to the show. Well, people, before we start asking questions to our panelists here, I'd like you all, as well as my panelists, to take a look at the data that is by the Save Family Foundation and My Nation Foundation domestic violence data of 2005 and 2006. Let's take a look at that.
Save Family Foundation and My Nation Foundation domestic violence data 2005-2006. Men surveyed 100,000. 98% men faced severe domestic violence at the hands of their wives and in-laws, in the form of verbal, physical, emotional, mental and financial abuse. Economic violence was the commonest, faced by 32.8% of participants. Physical violence was the closest second at 25.2%. Emotional violence followed suit at 22.2%. Sexual violence contended fourth with 17.7%. Verbal abuse was a problem faced by all men in the above categories. The survey also revealed that most abused men suffer in silence for fear of being discredited or ridiculed by the society. This resulted in a lot of psychological, sometimes irreparable trauma to the abused male. Further investigation into the problem revealed that many such men who are unable to withstand domestic abuse withdraw from the society, fall prey to addictions, or in extreme cases end their own lives.
Quite alarming stats over there. So Sandeep, my first question is to you. When we see those kind of statistics, it is obviously very disturbing. So as an activist, what do you think when you see those kind of figures?
Basically, the statistics output, what you get, is depending on the questions you phrase. So what happens is, like when the feminists will frame the questions for domestic violence, so apparently these guys have copied the same questions. What has happened is, so when they will, in your whole life, well, anybody has ever shouted at you, any husband any time shouted at you, or a wife shouted at you, they will say yes. So then the feminists will say 98% of wives in India are facing domestic violence. So these guys have become clever. So they said, okay, you have devised very good questions, so we will replace the woman with man. And when you replace with woman with man, you will get the same results.
So are you saying that these are exaggerated figures somewhat?
These are copied from the feminist figures which are flooding our media, and based on which this Domestic Violence Act was made. One of those, the surveys, they have basically the same survey that was used to make this domestic violence law, to push for domestic violence law, has been used by them, so you will get the same results. So that is what this survey is. So practically what is happening nowadays is that most of the cases that we get, so what wives come, and then they will say that wives and their parents will say that since the laws are like that, you have to agree to everything what the wife says. If you do not agree to her any wish, means they openly say right or wrong doesn't matter. She has the power. And power to destroy not only husband's life, but the power to destroy all his husband as well his family's life. So typical demand, they will say that husband should not mix with only with wife's parents, not with boy's parents. They will say we will not do child. Or then they will say expenses they will not
a little later, Sandeep, but before that I'd like Vivek's reaction here. Vivek, so do you also think that these kind of figures are exaggerated? If not, then what is your experience in this field?
To be very frank with the figures which I have seen today, if you go to courts these days, initially, supposedly for a Domestic Violence Act, which is filed under Section 12 of the Domestic Violence Act, the women implicates everybody, not only the husband, in-laws, relatives. Now, the courts have also started taking a lenient view because they also feel somewhere or the other that in every case, not only the husband, but all the distant relatives are made parties who are not even staying in the same house,
Right.
who have not even visited the said house even once. So the court does not even summon them these days.
Right.
So only those persons basically who've been living in the same house, who staying with the girl, are usually summoned. Supposedly you have the sister-in-law who's married and she's staying somewhere out of India or somewhere. The girl even made the said lady a party saying that she was in the marriage. Soon after the marriage she tortured me. So that is the only domestic incidents which she says has been done with me, and she wants the court to summon them
Right.
and call them before the courts. But now the court takes a lenient view and does not summon them. So with time, initially, if you see about the act, the Domestic Violence Act talks about that the first date has to be within 3 days.
Okay.
And the whole case has to be decided within 60 days. Which is
So it
not
can't
feasible.
just keep on stretching and
It
stretching.
can't be feasible,
Right.
because the investigation needs to be conducted, because women does not have proofs with them, most of them, and they come to the court saying that the matter needs to be investigated, and investigation needs time. And if you see, in very less of the cases, the women are getting favorable results because they are implicating men falsely. That's my opinion with respect to it, and that is why the figures are exaggerated.
Right, right.
Domestic
right,
violence
right,
law, if
right.
we are talking about, basically in this, the woman can ask compensation for mental harassment, and that is unlimited. So what they are doing is, somebody is asking 50 lakhs is common, what we are saying. For इन्होंने मेरे को गाली दी, मारा, कुछ किया, give me 50 lakhs for the mental harassment. ताऊ से अलग, मतलब father-in-law से अलग, husband से अलग. So why make such a law? When you are drafting a law, if you are saying that a woman can claim unlimited 50 lakhs, 40 lakhs, 100, 80, 85 lakhs, we are
Whatever
getting
the figure,
virtually every, except for one domestic violence report that I have seen, every time they will ask 10 lakh, 50 lakh for mental harassment compensation.
So
Then,
which means that basically this act is being misused by women.
basically it was meant like that if you give anybody okay, you have a matrimonial dispute and you can ask unlimited money from every male member or male or female members, so everybody will ask. It was made in a wrong way. The law is wrong. That is why we are seeing the consequences. And second, you are saying there is a section 19 in this law, in which what the parliament has passed has said that the woman can throw every male member out of the house. So potentially, as the law was passed in the parliament, even father-in-law could be thrown out of his own house by. So why?
Why frame such a law, first of all? That's your question.
Because it was not required. There is a 125 CRPC in maintenance law. What presently happens, before this law came into place, what was happening was that apart from 1/3 salary of husband plus extra for children, there was magistrates were giving extra for rent. If husband has an own house, you will get extra for rent. So this provision was already there in the law. Now you have made a law that virtually all houses now are of women only. The man doesn't have any house in India after making this law. But thankfully, within a few months, one of the mother-in-law's house case came. Batra by Batra judgment, you might have heard about it, which was, there was a lot of halla gulla by feminists about that. So this Batra by Batra judgment, they said that this law is clumsily drafted. This can lead to chaos in society. This interpretation of the law can lead to chaos in society. So the Supreme Court says that this section 19 will apply to only houses that are of husband, not of husband's relatives. So
Right.
thankfully something has been saved because of that. So when that happened, the so-called architect of this DV law, Indra Jaisingh, started a signature campaign that this this Supreme Court judgment should be reviewed by a 3-panel larger panel. We also started a counter signature campaign. So why do you want to throw old husband, old people out of their parents out of their own house? Even after this law, we have several cases that mother-in-laws have their own house, but because of the DV law order passing, they are not able to live in there. They are very old. DV law, they will get a judgment that their son cannot enter the house. So once the son cannot enter the house, how long that old lady can live in that house? So practically this is called house occupation law, what we call them in section 19. So practically mother-in-laws are losing their houses because of this law, which was not required to be there in the first place.
All right. Well, people, if you just joined, this is Gender Discourse, and today we are talking about the fact whether it is time now for us, especially for men, to have a movement of their own, to have a liberation movement of their own. Well, this is your time to ask your questions and to put in your views forward, as our lines are open right now, and the number is the same, which is 1800115313. That is 1800115313. We are talking about the fact whether we do need a men's liberation movement now. Now, Vivek, in spite of knowing about this act and in spite of knowing that it is being misused, but don't you think that still not many men actually come out with their problems just because of a social stigma? They feel that
it's not the social stigma. They don't have any legal recourse. If they come out, their life is destroyed.
I'll add to it. Supposedly, if you're going on the road, a boy whistles a girl, an FIR is registered, 354 is attracted. But supposedly, a girl whistles a boy. What legal recourse do you have? If you go to the police officials and say that I'm being maltreated by the girl, nobody will believe it.
Nobody will believe it. Right.
That's what. So now the time has come when we need certain amendments where the men should also be heard and they should have certain legal recourse.
Right.
So if you see the Domestic Violence Act, you have 5 sections. Section 18, 19, 20, 21, 22. If we talk about section 18, that is the protection order, where a girl can claim protection. Supposedly a house that is a 200 square yards house and you have 3 rooms in it. The girl can stay in that room, the other family members will be barred from entering the said room, and then she'll be given protection. And if the protection, so tomorrow the protection order is given to her, then what happens is, if she is residing there, she's not satisfied, she does not see, there are women who gets this right but they really don't want to live there. So they misuse the protection order. What they do is they make false and hope calls to the police. Then the protection order is violated, the court's order are violated. The men are again taken to task in that ways. Now, if we talk about 19 is the residence order. She can claim residence